we return to the movie-based Spider-Man games with The Amazing Spider-Man. Unlike the other movie-based Spider-Man games, this one is not based on the plot of the film. The Amazing Spider-Man instead takes place after the events of the movie. So technically this is another original Spider-Man story, one that just uses the film as a jumping off point. The story is actually pretty good and the gameplay is also solid, making The Amazing Spider-Man one of the better movie-based tie-ins. The story, as mentioned, takes place a few months after the conclusion of the events in the film. Oscorp is trying to clean up the mess Connors made with the cross-species experiments and fix its public image by having Alistair Smythe create robots capable of hunting down the cross-species. However, some of the experiments end up breaking free and infecting members of the Oscorp staff, including Gwen Stacy and Smythe himself, which leads Peter to having to team up with Dr. Connors again to stop the cross-species experiments and find a cure. The story is actually really good this time around, as the focus is clearly placed on Smythe rather than multiple villains like in past games. The missions and levels all seem connected within the narrative, so there's never really a moment when you feel like something is happening that's not truly a part of the story. However, the downside to this focus on Smythe and his nanobots, and the cross-species, causes the game to use some pretty damn obscure Spider-Man villains. Villains like Vermin, Iguana, and Natty. And here I was thinking that the Spider-Man animated TV show was scraping the bottom of the barrel when they introduced the Spot. The game does have Scorpion and Black Cat, but it's not the traditional Scorpion from the comics, and Black Cat already seems to have a history with Spider-Man, but she wasn't in the film, so it's a bit confusing as to how she fits in with everything else that's been going on. The combat for the game is noticeably similar to another superhero game franchise featuring the Dark Knight. All of Spider-Man's attacks are now mapped to the square button, with triangle acting as a dodge ability and circle firing off webs. Combat upgrades also work similar to the Arkham series in that you can select any upgrade you want when you have enough points. Some upgrades are cool, like webbing enemies to walls and stealth attacking 2 enemies at once. Now from the footage, combat does look pretty cool. I mean, look at this, I'm jumping around, dodging, webbing up enemies to the wall, the ceilings, but let's really think about what I'm doing here. All I'm really doing is pressing square like a madman. It's a case of style over substance. Yes, I'm pulling off cool moves, but by doing nothing at all. It's sort of like the combat goes on autopilot for a bit. I mean, the animations are really cool, but it would be kind of cooler if I was pulling them off and not just letting the game pick random ones for me at any given time. The boss fights are a bit underwhelming in that they're not really any different from the standard fights. You basically just mash the attack button, dodge a few times, and web retreat away from any hazard before repeating the process over again. It's just as enjoyable as the standard fights can be, which therein lies the problem. The boss fight should have shown a bit more innovation and used more creative means in defeating them. The only boss fight that really shows any innovation is the Black Cat fight, since it uses web retreats and web strikes in a much more meaningful way to inflict damage. Stealth segments also return for the first time in a while. Stealth is pretty cool and satisfying when it works. While it is easy to sneak up over enemies, it's not clear when they can spot you, so you might go in for a stealth attack on one enemy, but you'll never be 100% sure that the guy 2 feet away from you might also see you. The other problem with stealth is that it's hard to see where all of the enemies are. Unlike in the Arkham games where you can see where all of the enemies are and then plan out your attack, here you're forced to slowly stealth your way from one enemy to the next, hoping that you don't get caught on the way. Thankfully, there's only a few stealth segments and the game never forces you to engage in stealth over straight up combat. Once again, there is an open world to explore, and this time there are more side quests to take part in. There are a bunch of these missions to go on very early on in the game, so there's plenty of moments to veer away from the main story. The web swinging this time around is actually a big issue for the first time since Spider-Man 2. Your web's no longer attached to buildings, which seems like a step backwards after having so many free-roam Spider-Man games now with that feature, and also the camera is a bit too close to Spider-Man for his own good. The closer angle does make swinging feel more cinematic, but it's hard to see what's going on around you. It can sometimes lead you to swinging into buildings that you clearly can't see coming. A cool new feature added to the web swinging, though, is the web rush mode. It allows you to focus in on an object for Spider-Man to launch over to. It's helpful to create pinpoint landings while swinging around, though it's easy to just tap the button and have Spider-Man zip around, as it certainly does look cool. There are also comic book pages to collect, and for the first time these collectibles are worth more than the simple achievements of past games. Collecting a set number of the comics unlocks a real comic featuring Spider-Man. There are some cool ones like the first issue with Gwen Stacy and Black Cat, and there's even the original comic with the origin of Spider-Man. In addition to these collectibles, there are things to find like files and audio tapes in each of the levels, and these collectibles unlock the more common concept art, which is a nice addition. The presentation is pretty sharp, and it's quite a step up from the drab visuals of Spider-Man 3. The frame rate holds up a lot better than the last game, especially when web swinging. Character models look decent enough, and the voice acting is really good across the board. The one downside to the voice acting is that none of the talent from the film is used. The standout voice actor of the bunch has got to be Nolan North, who voices Smythe. The Amazing Spider-Man might not be the best Spider-Man game ever made, though it's definitely one of the more enjoyable movie-based games in the franchise. True, most of the combat and the upgrade system is taken straight from the Arkham games, though if you're going to take a gameplay mechanic from another game, you might as well take it from the best. The story is enjoyable, and there are some nice side missions to take your focus off the main campaign. So with all these improvements, clearly the sequel will be able to take advantage of all this. Well, we'll find out next time when we look at The Amazing Spider-Man 2.